Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
We're excited to have you on this episode about critique partners and critique groups, which we all feel is an extremely important topic.
Throughout when we say critique partner, that can also mean critique group, more than one person, unless we're specifically talking about the differences between one person and a group. So just know those are interchangeable. And I mean, I guess first off, what is a critique group as opposed to a beta reader, accountability partner, a professional edit?
Stephanie, do you want to jump in?
Critique partners and critique groups are the ones that see you through from the very beginning to the ugly beginning to the very beautiful end of your manuscript. And they see every horrible thing in between, as opposed to a beta reader who gets that lovely semi-polished manuscript and gets to read all of it from beginning to end. So that's the main difference to me. Critique partner may be one person who reads for you, or it may be a group that reads and comments together. They can be in person, they can be virtual. And all I can say is I wouldn't have anything published anywhere if it wasn't for critique partners. Literally.
Amen.
I would not. So they are critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they should be writers, right?
Hadn't even thought about that.
But
you're absolutely right.
It's important, right? I just remember when I started writing over a decade ago, like sometimes I was like, hey, hubby, hey, mom, will you read it? And that's great and fine and dandy, but that probably will not be the most honest critique. It might be, but probably not. But like someone that's an accountability partner doesn't have to be a writer. Maybe it's people that are, you have a friend or someone that you're both like have certain goals and you both are going to encourage each other and hold each other accountable for those. That doesn't necessarily have to be a writer. It can help. And then obviously a professional edit, you are paying someone to edit your manuscript. You should not be paying a critique partner or group.
I pay mine sometimes.
Well, I guess. Oh, you're right.
Yeah. You got to bribe them sometimes. Yeah, but no cash.
Right. Sometimes you got to bribe. And sometimes you pay for a critique, like through someone that's or something like that.
That's a professional critique, I would think. But you're not paying your critique
and
partners.
that's similar to
other than loving on them because you owe them big.
And I think the thing with critique partners is it's a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship, right?
Yes,
because
absolutely.
You are critiquing their work as well, which is why, to me, that's one of the main differences between a critique partner or critique group and a beta reader is that a beta reader is somebody who's a reader.
Yeah, correct.
And they're not necessarily a writer, and they aren't expecting anything in return. To me, a critique partner is someone that you mutually critique with. Like you critique their work, they critique your work. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always have to work that way. But to me, that's why these groups work, is because everyone joins in and everyone gets what they need from the group as well as gives. And I think that critiquing and learning to critique is just as important as learning to write, because you're never going to really truly, I think, be able to edit yourself well unless you learn to edit someone else's work.
So I think that's a really important point, because learning how to edit and how to critically look at someone else's work, and I mean a critical, professional look at somebody else's work, really also improves your own writing. And it's so essential.
And it's also not only essential to hear what people are giving, the feedback they're giving you on your manuscript, but listening to what feedback they're giving to other people's manuscripts too, right? That is such a learning experience, just to listen, stop talking and listen to see what people are saying. Yeah, it's invaluable.
So,
and how sometimes your ideas align or sometimes they don't align, and why don't they align? And learning all those things gets you also out of your own head and gets you to realize that there's a lot of people out there who think differently than you, and your manuscript is not necessarily going to be perceived in the way you think it's going to be perceived.
Yeah.
That's really important.
It is. And another thing, when you're thinking about setting up a critique group or getting involved in a critique group, what do you guys, Heather and Nicki, what do you advise for kind of the mix? Do you try and work with groups that have the same genre, that are writing for the same age group, or does it matter? What do you think? Nicki, what do you think?
I have found that for me, the most beneficial way is at minimum to do age group. If I'm writing one of my children's board book through YA, fiction or nonfiction, my critique partners that usually I lean on more are also writing and publishing in that age group, and vice versa with my adult stuff. Now, sometimes that switches when you find someone that is really great at critiquing. Maybe they write both, or there's something specific that they are so good at. Like they catch grammar, like they are the grammar goddess or whatever. Yes, exactly. But I think sometimes too, it can help depending on if you're really getting to the nitty gritty or if you've gone through a lot of critique partners, getting specific to a genre or a type of manuscript. It kind of,
I think genre is really the most important too when you're doing things like when there's expectations from the reader, like with romance, with fantasy. You want certain tropes. With sci-fi, you want certain tropes. Like you're going to disappoint your reader if you don't have certain things. And I think that if you go into a critique group that's maybe just general fiction or women's fiction and you're writing science fiction, then yes, they're going to be able to critique you in a general way, but they're not going to possibly be able to speak to the specifics of the tropes that you're using in science fiction or something like that. So I think it is important. Also, like with mystery, there are certain things in the mystery genre that really need to happen in a certain way, especially if it's like a cozy mystery, it has to have certain things. And if it's a thriller, it has to have certain things. Mm-hmm. So I think you need critique partners who know that genre, at least have read widely in that genre to know what is expected, and not that you can't go outside that. And we all love it when people turn tropes on their head or subvert tropes or things like that. But again, they need to know them in order to know what you're doing with them and if you're doing it right and if it's successful. So I do think when you start getting into genres like that, I think it's really a good idea to have people who are well-read in those genres.
Agreed.
Yeah, I do too. Although I do have to say, I have one critique group that most of us we've been together probably over 15 years. And we do write widely, all of us, from adult to kid and everything. But I think that's an exception, where we've been together and everybody's very well published for so long. So that's rare. I'm very blessed to have that group. And so it can be that if you develop those relationships over a long period of time and you have a group that writes widely, you can do that. But I still, like I said, like we were talking before, I still want to get something within genre. So I have more than one critique group to run projects through. So that's a whole nother issue. How many critique groups can you deal with?
Right, because like we mentioned before, you want to reciprocate. Yes. And there will be times I know that I've had to say, hey, so Stephanie, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm on this deadline. You communicate that. Yeah, no problem. I'll catch you on the next draft or something like that. But if you are continuously critiquing someone's work, but they are never critiquing yours. Yeah. And we'll get more into this later, but that's something that's like a red flag. But let's talk about the good. Let's talk about why is this important? Like, what are the biggest benefits and maybe misconceptions, do you think, Heather and Stephanie?
The biggest benefit is a shoulder to cry on. You said earlier that should they be writers? And yes, my husband is actually a very good editor, and I will have him go through and read it, but he's not a writer, so he doesn't understand my anguish in having to, oh, this one's never going to sell. I love it so much, but it's not going to sell. So having those writer friends who've really, truly been with you through all those edits, and they know how hard you work, and they know that it's good, and they can hold you up when it doesn't sell. And on the positive, they can celebrate big with you when something gets published or gets recognized by an editor, or you get some good feedback. So to me, building that community and having that support network that understands you, it's really important, at least to me. Maybe there are authors out there who can do it all on their own, but for me, it's my office time. When I have critique time, that's like going into the office, talking to the other professionals and finding out what's working, what's not, and how we can help each other. So those are all the good things.
I think another really big, that is a good thing. I think another really big benefit to having a critique group or critique partners is that you can help build each other up. Mm-hmm. And grow together. But at the same time, you are not having to pay.
Oh, yeah.
A professional edit is expensive if you get a good one from a really good editor. And I think that when you have 3 or 4 sets of eyes on a manuscript, you can get some really great feedback that's just going to help you make your manuscript really good. And the other thing is, to me, the benefit of having a critique group rather than a single critique partner is that when you get that feedback all together, you can see where their opinions align and where their opinions don't align. And I think I talked about that a little bit before, but to me, when you have 2 or 3 people telling you the exact same thing, then it's like, this is a really big thing that you need to fix.
Yes.
And it does cost you time. It costs you time in investment that you're putting into their manuscripts, but that's also learning. So to me, that's like part of your work. That's part of perfecting your craft, is learning to critique other people. And to me, it's not lost time. It's actually like school that you don't have to pay for as well. So to me, that's a big benefit of critique groups and critique partners. And also brainstorming.
Yeah.
Yes. For sure. And I think another benefit, and this goes into, which we can also talk about what you want to look for in a critique partner or critique group. But I always know that my critique group is going to be honest, loving and kind, but honest. Mm-hmm. And for me, I came to a point where I was like, if we're not all wanting to move forward, if I'm not with people that are running this journey in this race, then that's not going to work for me. Because I was in a group before when I started out. Everyone was so lovely, but nothing constructive was said. And I can sit with my fur babies and they can like nod and lick and tell me how wonderful my manuscript is, but that's not going to make me a better writer. That's not going to get me published. And for me, I'm not interested in that. There was a point where it was like, okay, this isn't just something, a hobby. So I think that's a huge benefit. So with that flip, there can be a misconception that a critique partner or group is just sitting around and like patting each other on the back about everything, and your manuscript isn't transforming. You can get yourself in that situation, maybe not knowing it at first, but a critique group should make you become a better writer. And if you're not, then that's something to look at, right?
Absolutely.
And I think another common misconception along those same lines is that everything your critique partner says is right, or everything that your critique partners point out needs to be fixed. Part of growing as a writer is having these things said about your manuscript and you having to decide, like, oh, this person said this thing. Do I really think that's true? Or how would this change my manuscript, and would it change it for the better? Or maybe it wouldn't. Or maybe this is actually what I was trying to do here, and they didn't see that. I think another misconception of critique groups is that you should always listen to your critique partners equally. And the misconception is that critique groups are created equal. I don't think they are. I've been in many critique groups over the years, and like Nicki said, lovely people, wonderful people didn't necessarily help me as a writer. And a lot of it was not that you shouldn't be social, but like when you go and you have an hour of social time and a half hour of critique, that's also.
So how do you, what do you look for when you're looking for a critique partner or group to make sure that it's going to be a good fit for you?
Heather, you go.
Heather, yeah.
I think you need to look for someone who's at a similar place, somebody who is at least on the same level, essentially, as you in your writing journey. And how I would gauge it is, are you in the querying process? Have you gotten requests for fulls? Do you have an agent? As an agent, I can tell you, I really appreciate it when my clients have already had their work go through beta readers and critique groups before it gets to me, because then what that allows me to do is take that manuscript and elevate it even further. So if I get it before your critique group sees it, then I'm going to have to work 10 times as hard, and it's going to tire me out, and maybe I won't see things that I wish I had seen because I'm getting too close to it.
That's excellent advice, to look for somebody that's at your level or maybe above your level. That gets hard sometimes, though. Let's be honest. Trying to find somebody, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, about where to go to find them. But it's critical that if you're forming a group, this I have found from trial and error, the whole group needs to be at a similar level. This may sound really mean, but this is going to save people time and pain. Is you may think it's wonderful that you're a beginning writer and you get to, somebody's generously asked you to come in with a group of really already writing professionals. That's not where you need to be. You want to be in with the people who are beginning because you need that beginning help that they can't give you. And if you are a professional and you want to be kind and loving and help them start a group, but don't stay in it and kill yourself over it, because you really do have to put that work at the level or a little bit above the level of where you are, because you're trying to elevate your work and you're trying to elevate the work of the people that you're critiquing with. And so it does have to be mutually beneficial. Otherwise, you burn out. And critique groups do die. Like I said, I'm very blessed that I have one group that has been together for over a decade. That's unusual, because life goes on. People get published, people don't, people drop out. It's just, there's a life cycle to a critique group often.
Yeah. I know I look for, we touched on this, I'm looking for someone that has similar goals and that is willing to put as much into their critiques as I try to do with mine. If I don't think I can give a critique partner's manuscript or query letter or whatever the attention that it deserves, I've learned to be very honest about that, because I think we've all been in a situation where we've had a critique group member, you've poured into their manuscript, and then it's your turn. And you can just tell that it wasn't taken as seriously. And that can be super frustrating.
Yeah.
And also, I think I'm probably more candid than a lot of people. I definitely want to be kind, but some of my best critiques have been with people that have pushed me and gotten me uncomfortable to be like, why? Like, why are you doing this? Or what is your motivation? Or maybe it has nothing to do with the plot. Maybe it's my writing too. But that's, again, I think honesty should be a quality in every critique partner. Obviously, you want to be kind about it, but you want to be with people that are also doing the work. I think, Stephanie, when you're talking about making sure you're with someone or with other people that are in the same level, like when you go to a critique group, yes, you can give, oh, hey, this method or this trope. But if if someone's asking you basically to teach them because they don't want to put in the work of learning, it is rude and insulting, and it does no service to anyone in the group. It is a lot of work and it's really hard. And I've had other people be like, you need to go learn how to do this, or you need to go read that. And I've appreciated that. I'm like, oh gosh, that's embarrassing. But that's how we grow, yes, right? Absolutely. I don't know. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
In making sure it's a good fit, you need to not form a critique group and say you're together. I think you need to, or if you're going to join a critique group, you need to go there a few times and you need to try things out before you commit 100%, because until you really see what the group is like and what you're going to get back, as well as what you're going to give or what you're going to be expected to give. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. Like sometimes you might be at a time in your career where you're always on deadline, or maybe you happen to be at a time in your life when you're caring for an aged parent or something like that, and you don't have the bandwidth to read like 5 other people's manuscripts. Then, you have to be honest with yourself and say, this is where I'm at. This is where they're at. This is no matter which way it is. And essentially, you're interviewing each other for a while. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing, like you shouldn't be offended. They shouldn't be offended by what you say. If it's not a fit, it's not a fit.
Sometimes it happens because you do become friends with the people that you critique with often. So yes. I tend to view it a little bit more of a social organization rather than professional. And I think we all need to really keep in mind that while we enjoy being with other writers, that a critique group is supposed to be a professional organization where we are helping each other in our professional life in writing.
For sure. Okay, so why don't we talk about like the mechanics and nuts and bolts of a critique group? I know we talked about they can be in person or virtual. How long do you guys think they should meet? How frequent? Do you all have any opinions on that?
It's going to be up to the group, I really think. And it depends on what you're writing, too. If you're writing picture books and you've got people who are cranking out a picture book a week, then that's going to be a whole lot different than people who are writing long-form novels or long nonfiction. It's going to really vary, I think.
I agree with that. And I think, too, that it depends on your circumstance. One of my critique partners that I have right now, I meet with once a month. And we meet for 3 hours. And that works for us because we can get all of our stuff done. We can get everything ready. And the other reason it works is because both of us, she's an editor, I'm an agent, we're always looking at other people's manuscripts. And so it's one more manuscript that we have to look at. Mm-hmm. And when we meet once a month, it gives us that time to really dig deep into the things that we're critiquing. But at the same time, it's not once a week or every other week or something like that. But we're still making progress and we're still happy with that progress that we're making. So I think that's it. Are you both mutually or the group mutually getting out what you need from the arrangement?
I think that's true. And I think setting that up ahead of time, if you're creating a new partnership or a new group, having that open discussion, what will work for you? What is going to work for your meeting time? I have a group that we meet once a week, but it's not long. We're often just checking in. We meet longer if we have something to critique. Often we're checking in, what are you doing? It's accountability. But when you're starting a new group, you need to have those parameters set out. Are you going to is everybody going to bring a manuscript each time you meet? Do you have limits, word limits? Are you working on big chunks of novels? You have to set all that up because you're going to have somebody be disappointed otherwise. You can't have somebody show up with 7 picture books and have everybody expected, or have send in 7 picture books and everybody has to do that. You have to create some equity and set up some rules before you ever get going. So I think that's an upfront discussion that you need to have with your group. How long, how often, how much.
And you just talked about a new group. If, say, you've been invited to an established group or a community online or something that's already established and those rules are always already in play, then you need to evaluate for yourself and be honest. Is this too much of a commitment? Is it not enough? Am I going to feel frustrated, or will this? And be as honest as you can with yourself then, so you don't cause frustration or for you or people in the group. And that's okay. Everyone has a different speed and different goals. So there's not a wrong answer. It's just finding the people that you can run with.
Yeah.
And I think too, over time, groups change. And I think the only way that groups do last 15 years is when you reassess those parameters too. And sometimes you have to adjust. You have to readjust and say, hey, let's talk about this. Is this something that maybe we need to change or whatever? Because then no one's getting disappointed or having, issues without them being addressed.
That's an excellent point.
So
that communication is just critical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess then, as far as finding what other people's goals are, it's communicating that and being honest, saying these are my goals, and being okay to evaluate that maybe this whole group is really 2 different groups or something like that. But no one's going to read your mind on what it is you want. I know as creatives, most of us are introverts. So again, it's one of those growing things where we just have to get a little uncomfortable and be like, this is what I'm looking for in a group, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there are parameters, like you said, setting up how much you're going to do. One of the ones that I love is, can you talk during when you're being critiqued? I have my friend Linda Skiers and Jill Espbaum. They run an amazing picture book workshop. If you ever get a chance to go to it, it's fabulous. And what they do, which is brilliant, when your book is being critiqued, you are handed a Tootsie Pop. And you get to suck on it.
I love it.
The whole time.
Keep your mouth shut.
Your mouth is shut. And it's a bribe.
I love it.
And you're reminded
that is brilliant.
You cannot talk. You just have to listen. And I think maybe critique groups should always do that, because we all have a tendency to oh, but you're attacking my baby. And so if you have to keep that Tootsie Pop in your mouth. I love it.
And the problem with authors intervening in a critique is that what they're always trying to do is say, this is why, and they're trying to justify or they're trying to explain. And all it does is take away time where other people could be saying their critiques.
Right.
So you're actually losing valuable critique information by speaking instead of listening.
And you're losing camaraderie and trust, because if every time I give feedback and you get to decide what you do with it, but when I give it, and if you tell me, no, this is why I did it, now I don't want to share anymore because I think you're not receptive to questioning what it is, and vice versa. That's why.
Plus, also, if you're the person receiving that critique, I just think it's so important to just let it soak in, because something that someone says may hit you wrong in that moment because it's your darling, but later on you may be like, oh, dang it, they were so right. So part of learning to be a good critique partner, but learning to settle in and hear those things you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. If somebody doesn't understand why you did something, then you probably left something out of your book. And you need to go back and fix it.
Right.
Lots of reasons.
And we always have just to remember, right? You're not going to be sitting with your reader on the couch when they read your book to be like, well, what I really meant was this, or as much as that might be
exactly
nice, right? Like we don't get to dictate like in an audiobook. What I was really going for was this is great opportunities to laugh at ourselves, really is what
Hey, I'm just thinking the Tootsie Pop is the most brilliant thing ever.
It is brilliant.
So I recommend that for every critique group. Bring Tootsie Pops.
For sure. Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about ways that we can find critique partners or groups, either online or locally. What are some ways that we can offer?
I think if you're involved in any writing organizations, that's one of the first places to start, because just about every group that I know of offers some type of critique group or critique group matching. So I would start there, whether you belong to the Authors Guild, whether you belong to the Children's Writers Group, whether you belong to Sisters in Crime. They have people that are also in the same situation as you are, looking for critique partners. So that'd be the first place I'd start. You guys have some other suggestions?
I've found great critique partners through conferences or workshops or like a retreat. It's like a trial, right? And especially if it's multiple hours or days for an event, you start to see what the person wants and what their writing is like. And is it similar? And do you get along? And just those kind of things. I think those are huge ways. And a lot of times the conferences and retreats and stuff offer critique opportunities as part of what you're buying. I know for our retreats, part of something you pay for is not only professional critiques, but we're in peer groups. And our hope is that you and someone else, it's just like this Kindle relationship that's going to work. And that starts something further after the retreat. So that's a good place to start too.
Also, if you're looking for in-person, I think it's important. You can always check with your libraries, local libraries. You can check with local bookstores. They actually often set up or have conference rooms for critique groups, and that's always a resource that you can use as well.
Yes. And I don't know if we said this, if this goes with the online community, but different like contests or things like that. I know you can find great critique partners. That's also sometimes part of the program that you're in. So it's nice when they're in a genre or format or niche that you're writing. It narrows the scope down. If you're agented, I know I have recently just done this. My agent, Heather, one of her clients, he writes the same genre. And so we're exchanging a full manuscript. And I knew right away when I was reading, I was like, this guy can write. Now, obviously, because he was agented and because I know Heather and her style, I knew that he could write anyways. Do you know what I mean? So like that is one thing that is nice about that. There. It is a pre-screening, but for us it was, do we critique in some of the same ways? Are we going to be gently honest? I'm sorry, this isn't working, or whatever it is. So that's another way, whether it's your agent or maybe in the agency. So those are things you can speak to your agent or even editor if you have a repeat editor.
I think those are all good sources. And if you're really starting out, you're just looking for a critique group, and you haven't joined some sort of professional organization, this is your incentive to do that. Find the genre that you're writing in. There is a professional organization for that. Or find a retreat. Come to one of our retreats and meet somebody to do that. So nobody's going to come knocking on your door and inviting. Very rarely will they come and ask you to. I need you to critique and join my group. You're going to have to put yourself out there, but it's worth it. It is so worth it when you do it.
There are also online communities like I found Critique Circle and Scribble-File, and there's also, I know several of my clients have found other authors and critique groups or partners on Facebook groups that are specifically for certain genres or certain age categories or things like that. And also, I mean, you do have to be careful, right? Because you don't just want to be sending your stuff out. Make sure that these are established people that they're around, but also like there's NaNoWriMo.
And some of those Facebook groups are closed groups that you have to answer the questions and your review.
They are.
Somebody is making sure
And
they're
honestly,
a legit person in there. And those are the kind,
that's
you
great.
want to look for. Yeah.
Exactly.
And asking other writer friends. I know I'm getting ready to go into a new genre, so it feels like starting over again. Hey, do you know anyone that you would recommend reaching out that writes thrillers? Ask them. We all have. Stephanie has multiple groups, so she might know someone that's looking for someone, or you just never know. You're not going to know until you ask.
It really is all about networking.
It is.
Really is. Critique groups and all of it. Writing has a networking component to it that you have to participate.
Yes, absolutely.
And you don't know how? Ask us. We'll try and help you.
Yes. Yeah. We've all been there.
Yes. Still there sometimes.
Exactly. And doing it again and again. But that's the growing process. So what are some red flags that a critique group might not be a good fit when you're doing maybe that evaluation?
Such a fun question, Nicki.
Isn't it though?
No.
For me, the biggest red flag is what method do they use to critique you? Are they just throwing out opinions, or are they really providing you with positive and constructive critiquing?
Can you explain that a little bit more, Heather? Give me
some
examples.
So whenever, and I think this is a good way also to gauge where people are, right, in their writing journey. When I was very first starting out as a writer, I tried out groups, and I did find these people, like you guys said, at local writing groups. I reached out, I went, I met people. I was a new writer. I had only written a couple of books, and I was very new to it, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I would take my stuff, and sometimes people would just say, I think that this person's personality should be this way. Or I think that this could be this way. But they couldn't provide any kind of actual substantial reasoning. It was just their opinion. Then there's the kind of feedback that's, okay, your plot and your pacing flows really well here and here. But when I get to this point, there's a lot of telling. And it just really slows down the pacing. And I put the book down here and I didn't want to pick it back up. To me, that's constructive. Like, you're getting where it's working. Yes. Right? But then you're also getting a point where it's not working. The other thing that I think is really important is critiquing, and maybe we should just do an entire episode on techniques of critiquing. But, are they critiquing you, like constantly telling you how they think you should fix the book? Or are they saying, I'm seeing something here that isn't really working, and this is how this passage makes me feel? Or what if you did this? Or I have this question here and I don't really know what's going on. To me, those are all things that are indicators that are going to tell the author, like, there's something going on here, but I'm not trying to write your book for you. Right. And there's a big difference in those two ways of doing things. And there's all kinds of ways that you can be supportive as a critique partner, and ways that you can critique in a supportive way. And then there's ways in which you can just tear people down and say, I just don't like it.
Yeah, that's not helpful at all, actually. Like, even if that's how you feel.
Yeah.
Right. That no one grows from that except in a negative way.
Right.
I would agree. And I also think it's important when you go to critique a manuscript that you communicate what stage it's at. So if I've written a picture book and it's not maybe my first draft, I certainly hope it's not my first draft that I'm bringing to a critique group, right? Again, they're there to critique, not to write my manuscript. But if I come through, this is in the early stages, then as critique partners that, okay, we're talking overarching big picture things, right? And that helps with the time, the detail, and all of that in a critique. So a red flag to me then is if I'm in a group and someone gets a critique and the next time we meet, we're seeing the same chapters and nothing has changed, whether it was my opinion or not. To me, that's a red flag that you don't think any of us have any good things to say, which sometimes is the point, but you haven't changed anything. And I am literally reading the same words.
Yes.
And
that's my biggest red flag too, Nicki.
It's a red flag.
If you have somebody who keeps coming back and does not change anything and gives you the same thing over and over, huge red flag. And if you have more than one person in the group that does that, run. Just run. Because you're wasting your time and their time too.
Yeah, and I don't see anything wrong with saying, this is no different. I have no critique for you.
Agreed.
Yeah, there's no need for you to use up your valuable time for that.
But that is a huge red flag. If the people that you're trying to work with are not willing to change or to grow themselves, that's my biggest red flag. There's some other big red flags, like never being available when they're supposed to be. Never, like Nicki was saying, never actually reciprocating. You did took the whole novel, went through it, gave them everything, and then they don't have time for yours ever. Those are some big red flags. And unfortunately, it's not something that you can find out ahead of time. You just sadly have to go through the experience and find out. It'd be nice if they had like big stamps on your head. Red flag right here. Don't do that.
Another red flag I just want to talk about is, how do the people in your critique group talk about the other manuscripts that people are turning in? Mm-hmm. And are they being negative or are they being supportive? Because to me, a critique group needs to be supportive.
Yes. And
if there are a lot of people or even a few people or a couple people in your critique group who are complaining about the other people in your critique group, you're not in a solid group that's going to be uplifting and supportive. Yes. And I would run the other way. I have run the other way.
Yeah. There are times when you just have to protect yourself and move on, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
be protective of your time.
Exactly.
Like, be protective of your time and your heart, because you're putting your absolute soul into your manuscripts, and that's what you're trusting these critique partners with. And I think you need to know that you can trust them. There's so much more that we would like to cover.
But we're getting our big red flag that it's time to stop right now.
So don't worry. We'll be back for another part, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.